Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, March 7th, 2019. You know, I'm actually having to double-check that now. My, as you know, the laptop seems to be kaput. Thanks very much from all you well-wishers and others offering condolences. And I should add a fresh round of contributions toward a new piece of equipment. Thank you very much. I think we can probably handle it at this point. And I always appreciate additional contributions. It always sucks to have to replace a piece of expensive infrastructure. That's true. And I don't know yet whether this thing is going to be reparable, if you really want to put it that way, or needs to be replaced. It's pretty old. It probably should be replaced. But we'll see if we can't squeeze a few more years out of it. I don't know what sort of diagnosis we'll get at the so-called Genius Bar. Or maybe I ought to bring it elsewhere at this point. I think we're well outside of Apple Care at this point. Well, we'll see. Anyway, don't mean to trouble you with that. But the Mac Mini that now runs the show doesn't display the date and time in exactly the way I'm used to on my laptop. I guess I'm going to have to tinker with that. It gives me the day, Thursday. That much I knew. But, yeah, sometimes I actually need to be reminded of what the date is. But thankfully we got everything else going. The time is right. We have that going for us. The music is playable. I think this is working out. We were able to repair the podcast with overlaid music such that it didn't sound too much different from the regular podcast sound anyway, with the exception of my saying, oh my gosh, there's no music, and then there was music. I didn't really think about how that would come out when it came time to listen to the podcast. Anyway, I have another device nearby that I can at least temporarily use to check in on items that are in Pocket, so that's good news. I think everything else is up and running, and the only question is whether or not having the show run on the Mac Mini, but also having too many tabs open might freeze me up again. So I'll try and keep things to a minimum, and I think we'll be able to make things work if we're just careful enough about it. All right, and we'll see what Greg has to offer us later on, it being Thursday. We do expect him in. He's here already. This computer works terrifically. All I have to do is speak into it, and Greg shows up. So this is the best computer setup I've had so far. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. I thought I'd test the system.
Yeah, well, so far so good. Oh, I remember now. I have, using only this Skype, there's something I have to press somewhere in order to see your list of items. So let me go find that while you introduce me. I think that's it right there.
Well, while you're doing that, let me just point out something to you.
Yes, please.
What? Paul Manafort is getting sentenced at 3:30 today.
Oh, I'm free for that.
How's your day?
Better than that, I think.
That's what I'm thinking, right? So I was listening to the problems with tech and thinking, hey, you're not Paul Manafort. You are already ahead of the game.
It's true. Nobody's going to strain his orange juice, unless that's some sort of weird euphemism that I don't know about.
Let's not find out.
All right. Prison's a weird place.
This is way too much information. I don't want to know that.
I'm going to strain your orange juice. I think, thank you. I don't know.
I'll put that on a list of things that I'll remember have extreme significance. Everyone now
suspicious of their orange juice. Okay.
Right. Anyway, a lot going on, but it's funny. It feels like a slow news day if Ivanka hasn't been indicted. But there's a lot going on nonetheless.
There is a lot, and we'll try once again to catch up. But, well, there's a lot of stupid every day.
Right. Did you happen to get my
yes,
information about privilege and germaneness?
I did. And, that'll take some thought and digging into. I'm not 100% certain where they were coming from. Who's asking this question? I'm not certain.
James Wallner, who's a political scientist type.
Okay.
And he has a little piece here on legislative procedure. It's dated March 2019. And your listeners will see where we're going with this in a few minutes. But the big sweeping picture is that Kirstjen Nielsen is experiencing what we, the general public, sort of know as oversight.
Yes. It was
she may think it's harassment.
Yesterday.
But, hey, Kirstjen Nielsen, you did have a hard time at that hearing the other day, but you're not Paul Manafort yet, and you're not going to jail yet. So, your day could have been worse. And you went and you had this hearing, and they talked to you, and they discovered that you didn't know anything about what was going on at the southern border.
Yeah, that's not a good look in terms of I'm a cabinet secretary, I'm highly paid, people should defer to me, etc. So that's the basis, by the way, of a lot of our legal deference to cabinet secretaries and their discretion is that they're assumed to know in depth what's going on in their departments.
Well, she made a lot of claims and a lot of lies.
Yeah, that's not
right?
good.
And Aaron Rupar was, for example, cataloging some of them. She confirmed she's aware of parents who have been separated from their children and deported without them, but says, quote, there was no parent who was deported to my knowledge without multiple opportunities to take their children with them, including signing forms that they didn't understand that basically separated them.
Yeah.
Then Jim Langevin tried to pin her down on the fact that Trump claimed there are currently record apprehensions at the border, which is, of course, not true, but she wouldn't admit that it was wrong. She kept saying, well, he probably meant something else. I can't answer your question because I don't know what he said in context. He said in context there are currently record apprehensions at the border. That's a pretty simple statement. And how many apprehensions are there? And she said, well, this year there might be as many as 900,000. But in previous years there was double, triple, quadruple that.
Right.
So therefore, what Trump said was wrong, correct? Well, I don't know because I don't know what he said in context.
Yes.
She repeated that like 100 times.
That's the only tactic available to her. I guess what she really means is we keep records, and this is one of them. It's a record. I think I get away with that
she got grilled about the false claim that she made last summer that DHS didn't have a policy of separating families when they did, and she wouldn't answer that one. And then, of course, remember Clay Higgins?
Yes.
The fellow who demanded the boxes?
Right.
So he was comparing migrants and asylum seekers trying to cross the southern border to the Allies' D-Day invasion to liberate Europe from the Nazis.
That seems like a good comparison.
That was a great comparison, and I was just waiting for him to explode and start yelling at Nielsen, where are the boxes?
Oh, he thought she had some too, huh?
No. And then Representative Underwood, Lauren Underwood, one of the new rookie freshmen who's actually doing a fantastic job. She got Nielsen to admit that she was broadly unfamiliar with research indicating kids are traumatized by being separated from their parents before DHS implemented a zero-tolerance policy. She said, well, I didn't know it was going to hurt the kids.
That seems like one of those research topics that you kind of know how it's going to come out before you start.
Right. Well, but Underwood said, look, from what I've heard today, I'm not sure if DHS was so negligent, if they didn't know how traumatic family separation was for children, or if they knew and they did it anyway. Either way, it's bad.
Yeah.
And then she was asked, what about the babies in cages? That was Alyssa Slotkin asking her that one. And, of course, she denied that they were cages.
Right. Then I think she was asked to describe them.
Separation.
Yeah. She was asked to describe the accommodations and then asked, so how is that different from a cage? I think she said it's bigger.
Well, then Nielsen said so far this year 3 children have died in CPB custody. That's Customs and Border Patrol custody. She said she hasn't spoken with the affected families. And she got paraded for her apparent lack of knowledge of U.S. asylum law.
Yes, right now.
I mean, it just went on and on and on. It was just a terrible, terrible hearing for her. Okay, so what's that got to do with germaneness and privilege? Well, this is all about the Trump administration's attempt to deal with what's going on at the southern border. And part of his attempt to deal with this is, as we talked about yesterday, to do the old Republican dodge of, if the numbers are up, it means you have to do my policy, and if the numbers are down, it means you have to do my policy.
Yeah. Okay.
So he wants to build a wall. So Congress didn't give him the money. They refused. They had 2 years to do it with complete Republican control, but when the Democrats took control, they continued to refuse to give him what he was asking for. And he said, well, I'm going to go around you, and I'm going to declare a national emergency, and I'm going to get my wall anyway. And I'm going to take it from military families, and I'm going to take it from anywhere I could find it, and go ahead and sue me. And, of course, it's Trump, and he means it, and people will sue him, and they'll win. But in the meantime, it's going to be held up for a long time in court, and the wall's not getting built.
Right.
So the Democrats said, this is not a good idea. So this is where you have to check me about factual correctness here. So the House decided that they were going to pass a bill. It's not a law until it's signed. So they passed the bill essentially saying that they disapprove of the president's emergency declaration.
Yes.
And because it's a privileged resolution, well, it's the House anyway, but they only needed a 51, a 50 plus 1% majority to pass that. Mm-hmm. And then it gets kicked over to the Senate. The Senate then gets 18 days to vote on it. They get 2 weeks to consider it, and then when the process starts, they get 3 days to debate it. And at the end of that 3 days, I guess there's I don't know what it's called, a resolution to finish, a resolution to conclude, whatever it is.
Yeah, time expires on the debate. Okay, yeah. So then they'll have the House's resolution before them for a vote.
Right. So far, so good. Now, because it's a privileged resolution, it means that, number one, the Senate has to vote on it, discussion about that in a minute, that it's going to be decided by a bare majority, not a supermajority, so no filibuster. The rules that say that essentially cloture happens after 3 days means that filibustering has nothing to do with it. You're not allowed.
Right. Okay.
And in order to maintain that status so that a bare majority gets to decide what to do with that particular bill that the House sent over, you can't add any amendments to it that are not germane.
All right. Yes.
If you add an amendment to it that's not germane, then perhaps it becomes no longer a privileged thing.
I see.
Why would that be relevant? Because people who don't want to embarrass the president may attempt to add all of these non-germane amendments in an attempt to wreck the concept of it being a privileged bill. Because if you do that, then you need 60, and it's not clear they have 60. They may have 60 anyway, so it may be a stupid game. But that's been bandied about as a thing to do, and that's why I'm bringing it up.
Interesting. Well, I haven't thought that one all the way through, although there are some difficulties with it. How you add a non-germane amendment will require some gymnastics, and I guess if you're willing to do anything, well, then you can do anything. But if
that's really my point here. You see, the whole thing is not so much as to whether this would work or doesn't work. I don't think they're going to go that route. But in theory, what this argument that James Wallner is making here, a resolution to terminate Trump's emergency declaration, doesn't specify how it may lose privilege.
Right.
What he's saying is essentially that this is one of those things that you have explained to us before, where a senator may do something and it can be challenged, and the parliamentarian may rule one way or the other, but the parliamentarian's advice is advisory only, and the chair, meaning McConnell, who has the gavel, can decide that they want to do this anyway. In other words, the parliamentarian may tell the Senate, if you allow this amendment to be added, it's non-germane, and that may destroy the privilege of what you are voting on. And I'm telling you, as parliamentarian and Senate historian, this has never been done before.
Right.
Nobody's ever done this and destroyed a privileged resolution this way. So, I may advise you not to do this.
Yeah.
And McConnell may say, thank you very much for your advice, you're fired, or thank you very much for your advice, I'm not firing you, I'm just ignoring you.
Yeah.
And we're going to vote on this thing anyway. Because you can.
The difficulty I see, I mean, they really would have to, I think, take an additional step. If the parliamentarian says, look, this amendment that you're suggesting is non-germane, they can certainly say, no, we don't accept your advice. It is germane, and then pass it. And then they're stuck with it. Now we've destroyed the privilege.
But now
no,
it's
you
germane.
you just made it germane in order to pass it. Or alternatively, they could offer an amendment and it's fine and nobody even asks the question whether it's germane. But I guess they could get down there and ask the question, is this amendment germane? And the parliamentarian could say, yes, it is. And they could say, well, we rule that it isn't, but we also are going to vote to adopt it in the same motion and thereby destroy the privilege of the resolution. I mean, that would be an extraordinary thing to do. To say you're obviously torpedoing it on purpose. It's difficult to get to a place where you're allowed to hold a vote, technically. So I think what you need is for the parliamentarian to say that something isn't germane, for the Senate to either say, we acknowledge its non-germaneness, but hereby adopt it anyway in the same motion, or else say, we acknowledge its non-germaneness, and now, in violation of statute, which allows only germane amendments, we want to vote on this thing. So they really have a difficult...
So it depends what you're trying to do, in other words.
They have to break the law to do it in 2 votes, or they could come up with some sort of self-executing motion to overrule the parliamentarian and deem the amendment adopted, notwithstanding germaneness.
Right. So again, why does this come up?
I don't know.
From the report here, reports indicate that some Republicans believe that a resolution considered under the National Emergencies Act will lose its privileged status, and again, that means it's subject to filibuster, if the Senate adopts any non-germane amendments to it on the floor. This appears to be because the Senate parliamentarian has advised that amendments to such resolutions must be germane. But it's important to note that the parliamentarian's role is to advise senators on what the Senate did in the past. The parliamentarian is not authorized to infer what the Senate is required to decide. Only the Senate can determine its own rules. So the chair rules on points of order, not the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian merely advises the chair. Mm-hmm. Fine. So the National Emergencies Act and the Senate standing rules don't prohibit amendments to resolutions of termination. That's what the word I was looking for. It's a resolution of termination to finish the 3-day thing there. They do not require that amendments be germane, and they don't define precisely what has to happen for such a resolution to lose its privileged status on the Senate floor. So part of his technical arcane piece here is simply to say, we've been told that the House sent this privileged thing over to the Senate, and because it's privileged, things have to happen. But when you drill down into it, it doesn't really clearly super-duper define what it means to be privileged or how you would lose that. And there are perhaps ways that could happen, even if they would be ill-advised and make the Senate look foolish.
Yes, it would be ill-advised, make the Senate look foolish. And as you know, we can't turn the Senate into the House. That would be an awful thing to do. And that's pretty much where you would be standing at that point. We warned about it. I mean, when everybody said that there was going to be this vote in the House and that would force the Senate to do it, we all said at that point, you almost never can be sure that you're forcing anything unless there's a law somewhere that says everybody goes to jail unless this happens. And there isn't one of those. So,
right.
Yeah, well, that's
so the bottom line here is that if the majority of the Senate really want to get this thing done, and they do, and they're going to vote to support what the House has done, then although there may be some arcane things that McConnell and others could do, they probably won't, because that's not really what the majority of the Senate want.
Yeah, that's a problem in itself.
Because the presiding officer could submit the question to the full Senate to be determined, and anything that there's no exact rules on. Mm-hmm. And that's happened before. That happened last December during the Senate's consideration of the Yemen War Powers Resolution. And so senators, if they want to, can do a lot.
Yes.
And again, I just mentioned that because, number one, you have brought to our attention that you can't just assume things should happen because some guy wrote an article that said this is what's going to happen. If there's no precedent, we really don't know what some of the implications are. Some of the arcane rules matter because if you wrote them never thinking that, opposition to it would be invoked, then perhaps there are ways to stop things that you hadn't considered that you'll have to, and you have to rewrite the rule next time.
Right. Well, there's always a surprise that can be pulled out somewhere. It's very rare that senators have the gall to do things completely outside anybody's imagination or anybody's conception of what the bounds are. Every once in a while, though, it does happen, and I'm sure lots of you can think of examples. And probably the Neil Gorsuch thing comes to mind for most people, and the lack of a vote on Merrick Garland. But
so
these things do
norms
happen.
And precedents matter even when they're not written into law. Sometimes you decide you have to write them into a law after they've been violated because they've been violated.
Yes.
But this is an example of the House wants to do something, and the Senate reluctantly, because it's a Republican majority, is going to go along with it for their own institutional reasons, being fully aware that there are ways to gum up the whole thing, and they probably won't, but it's worth watching because they could.
Yeah, and then they'll ask for a pat on the head for not doing it.
Something like that.
But okay.
Anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is.
And it just keeps us focused on, first of all, process does matter, but also that, there's a lot happening, even though the superficial headlines of the day, are going to be a lot of Dems in disarray stuff.
Yes, well, there is a bit of disarray. So now that's everything at this point.
Now, some good articles about that.
Okay.
I have a little tweet thread here from Julian Zelizer, that I want to cover, who is a political scientist / historian. The difference between how much the news media has been covering liberal extremism in the Democratic Party versus conservative extremism in the Republican Party is a problem. And here are a few thoughts. Especially problematic is the fact that social scientists have demonstrated the asymmetric nature of partisan polarization. We talk about this all the time, and they mention Matt Grossman's book, Asymmetric Politics. Here's the great Norm Orenstein explaining the reality to Vox.com, admitted Republicans have broken politics. And that example that we were just using is one way in which they could do such a thing. Mm-hmm. Just by, forgetting the norms and go ahead and trying to push everything to the limit. And the stories are having an impact. 64% of registered voters, according to a Harvard CAPS Harris poll, think the Democrats are headed to socialism. Even though nobody knows what socialism is. We were laughing yesterday on Twitter because Gallup had a poll asking how you define socialism, and 6% of the answers were, well, it's being very social. It's using social media.
I like that
it's
definition.
Talking to people. So obviously Armando's a socialist because he's fun to talk to, and I
think he'll be happy about that.
Yeah, he's outgoing, he's extroverted, and clearly social. So one of the problems is that much of the news coverage blows the socialist takeover of the Democratic Party way out of proportion. At its most basic level, it's worth remembering that most of the new House Democrats are moderate. And that has a lot to do with what's going on right now in terms of the Ilhan Omar controversy.
Okay.
Many on the left voted to elect Speaker Pelosi, a coalition builder, as their leader. The predicted coup never happened. And side note, even the socialism of Bernie Sanders looks a lot like the New Deal Great Society liberalism. So the other Democratic presidential candidates are not socialists. The candidates champion policies that have broad support. So, for example, climate change. On the other hand, the right wing controls the GOP, so climate change denialism, hardline anti-immigration views, staunch opposition to gun control, and America Firstism. And Trump, a Republican, has attacked traditional international alliances and courted dictators. So the place where the GOP is in 2019 compared to 1980, let's say, with Ronald Reagan is remarkable. No reason for Reagan nostalgia, but seriously, can anybody imagine Ronald Reagan's hopeful farewell speech being okay today? Faith in America and its people and so on and so forth, all of its people. So Norm Ornstein and Thomas Mann have shown there's no comparison in terms of how far Republicans are willing to go in subverting basic procedures and norms compared to Democrats. Again, the example we just gave is a concrete one. The Tea Party set the stage for Trump, and the coordination and collusion between Fox News and the administration is stunning, which gets to another story about debates and whether or not they'll be on Fox. As Jane Mayer, New Yorker, has written, this relationship might even reach into basic antitrust decisions, and that's pretty radical.
Ooh. Okay.
So, if you watch many news outlets on TV, online, and in print, there seems to be far more discussion about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the dangers of Democrats drifting into socialism, or sometimes as they just call it far left, than there is of Republican extremism, which starts all the way up the top.
Okay. Yes.
Right? As Paul Waldman argued in the Washington Post, a Democrat socialist is precisely the question Trump wants us to keep asking, as long as we don't get any deeper, because it means we won't be exploring what Democrats actually want to do. So it's about time we got the coverage right. I think he's absolutely right about that, and that's pretty much what we're saying. We'll deal more with it after the break.
Okay.
But it's just easy to ask the question, are the Democrats too far left? Are the Democrats too socialist? What does that mean? Are they too social?
Yeah.
Do they smile when they talk to you? Is that the problem?
That may be it. They have dance videos, all sorts of social activity on the social media. So that social media usage makes them socialist all by itself. I guess this is it's certainly where they want to keep the debate anyway.
It is. With your new setup, I don't know if you get music or stuff, but it's
I do, but well, yes, thank you.
I'm not hearing it.
Well, it's not coming up yet. As we have 7 seconds, 6 seconds. I meant 5 actually. Thinking about 3 now.
I'm totally off.
Yeah,
I'm breaking norms and precedent.
Okay, how's that?
There it is.
Yeah, okay. So, my if things go right, inside information, if things go right, the alarm silently goes off at 9:27, giving me 30 seconds to find my way to the soundboard and hit the button. So, 9:27 and 30 seconds, the music comes in. And then we have 32 seconds before we're cut off again. That's now down to 7, 6, 5. You get the picture. All right, we'll be back after 2 minutes. That's 60 seconds twice. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And all right, more discussion during the break of the interesting procedure. It is really, it's arcane stuff, but you're absolutely right. Your last bit of conversation here. McConnell is all about trying to escape from straitjackets. If he doesn't want to do something, he's all about trying to find a way not to. And, everybody, the most concrete example everybody saw, of course, was just simply not holding votes on judges that he didn't want to be approved. And if he's willing to do that, he's certainly willing to do that. It's actually more within bounds on questions of legislation. We're just not going to take that up. Same thing happening now.
We see an example of that right now.
Yeah, we do. Not just this resolution of disapproval either.
No, we're talking about H.R. 1. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's a relatively big and important bill that's coming before the House. E.J. Dionne has a great column about it. How will we repair our democracy after Trump?
I don't know.
H.R. 1 offers a clue.
Oh. Well, it's good to have a clue. People
the
often
House
tell me
proposal, Sniff the Cognoscenti, is merely a messaging bill.
So what, the Cognoscenti?
It's a messaging bill.
Okay.
That's all. They sniff.
They
put they shine up their monocle and put it in their eye and say, it's just a messaging bill.
I see.
Actually, no, it's a marker. It's a bill worth fighting for in the future, says E.J. Dionne. Recall that versions of Medicare, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and more expansive civil rights proposals, all languaged in Congress or were defeated before they passed. What commends H.R. 1 is its comprehensiveness. It brings together traditional reformers with strong incentives encouraging candidates to rely on small rather than large contributions, tougher disclosure requirements of who's paying for what ads, civil rights advocates with provisions for automatic voter registration, expanded early voting, a ban on unjustified voter purges, and reenfranchisement of those who have served felony sentences, and lays the groundwork for renewing the Voting Rights Act's effectiveness.
That's all good stuff.
And it's got more stuff in there, too, about ethical lapses specific to Trump, presidential conflicts of interest, a requirement that presidential and vice presidential candidates disclose their income tax returns, core problems our democracy faces by banning gerrymandering, calling for the use of paper ballots in federal elections to protect against hacked voting machines. And as EJ says, there's more there, but you get the drift.
It's good norm
so the House is going to be
bill.
voting on this and debating this, and I think it's an important debate to watch, and it's an important bill. And then it goes to the Senate, and McConnell won't bring it up to a vote, but he will bring up the Green New Deal. And when asked why you're going to bring up one and not the other, he said, because I can.
Right. Well,
because it's up to me. I decide.
Yeah. Normally, you don't say it that way because it angers the people who decide whether or not you get to be the decider. But for now, all the Republicans are enjoying Mitch McConnell taking heat for them.
That's right. You know, he's doing it for them. He is up for election in 2020, but he's a pretty safe seat. So he feels like, he can do these things, and he is.
And he trades it for favors later. I protected you. Even in an election year, I took the heat for you.
Right. So, again, the power of the gavel is tremendous, and that's why this past election, 2018, was so monumental. Getting a House majority for Democrats is enormous. And, yes, there's going to be growing pains with it. And, there's a variety of reasons as to why that is. The new House Democrats come from relatively diverse districts. Some of them just don't have the experience of, how to modulate what you're saying for a national audience. And some of them are learning real quick how to and relish it and don't feel like they're doing anything that needs to be modified. And at the same time, their elders are, shall we say, aghast, putting the monocle in their eye and saying, oh, tut, how and why are you doing this? So here's a nice piece trying to summarize a lot of that in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Trio of new House Democrats knock party off message.
Oh, we're in disarray. Damn.
Democrats in the this is our Democrats in disarray, TM.
Okay.
Trademark. Democrats in the Congress on Wednesday spent another day grappling among themselves over how best to put out political fires sparked by several of their new members wrestling with perceived anti-Semitic statements by one, promises by another to force action on impeachment of the president. I think that was Tlaib.
Yes.
And continued fallout from the climate change proposals of a third new member of the House, and that would be AOC. As the U.S. House began debate Wednesday afternoon on a sweeping bill chock full of reforms in elections, voting, and government ethics, Democratic lawmakers were fielding questions instead about Ilhan Omar, whose statements with regards to Israel have repeatedly put her colleagues on the defensive in recent weeks, spurring talk of a House vote designed to admonish Omar, but with no agreement on what kind of resolution to draw up, and with some Democrats pushing back against the idea of punishing her. House Democrats engaged in a vigorous closed-door tussle over Omar on Wednesday morning, emerging with no consensus on how best to move forward as Republicans lob verbal grenades with glee from the sidelines.
Yeah.
So, the fact of the matter is this is going to be one of those Overton window things. Okay? Anti-Semitism is bad. Anti-Zionism is up for debate. The two are not the same. It has been basically forbidden to discuss Israel and Israeli policies regarding Palestinians and their role in the Middle East for a long time in American politics. And this is pushing the window to the place where you can actually discuss that stuff. But there's going to be a lot of pushback from that. A lot of Democrats and Republicans are very uncomfortable about that. Republicans are happy to lob grenades at Democrats, but they themselves don't want to discuss it because then they'd have to discuss the fact that a lot of Israeli support comes from evangelicals who are just as likely as happy to see Israel destroyed because that helps to bring on the rapture.
Yeah.
And they don't want to talk about that.
Oh, well, I do.
So it's just fascinating to watch all of this play out. So you have freshmen speaking out when that's not the norm. You have a woman who happens to be non-Christian and non-Jewish speaking out on issues. There's a tremendous amount of pushback because she's Muslim. We saw that in some of the local Republican attempts to try to tie her to 9/11.
Sure.
As offensive as that was. And so you have to defend her from that while at the same time saying, a lot of what you said actually is really offensive to American Jews.
Certainly
by the
can
way,
be.
the background is Netanyahu's up for re-election and he's going to be indicted and, he may lose.
Yeah.
So
he is
a lot
indicted.
of fixtures in politics when it comes to U.S.-Israeli relations are under flux right now, making everybody uncomfortable and making this even a bigger issue.
Yeah. Well, there'll be some attention paid to it, but I like that they were working. They were working where they were supposed to be working, behind closed doors yesterday.
Yeah, I think
Didn't resolve anything, but that's where
everybody,
worked
please
this
stop Twitter.
Yeah,
Stay
right.
on Twitter.
It doesn't have to be done on Twitter. That's true, and it would be wise if it was not, because it just invites comment from people who have no genuine interest in actually solving the situation, but inflaming it.
Right. Meanwhile, we have the Green New Deal, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with the Green New Deal, but it was a botched rollout because a draft of things that weren't necessarily going to be into the final were posted on websites by the AOC team. And there were specific climate policy changes. If you want to make a broad statement, non-binding resolution, then don't include details. If you include details, then it's going to be picked apart. And that's pretty much what happened and why for a week or so people were talking about cows passing gas, which was, from a political point of view, stupid.
I mean, everybody knows that.
It was a mistake. It was a rookie mistake, right?
Yeah,
it should
I guess.
not have happened.
I don't really know exactly what happened. Actually, yours is the first explanation of that I've bothered to check into. I heard that at some point some version of it had something to do with cows, and this led people to eat hamburgers in protest. But
exactly. Methane,
and then of course that has since been conflated into. Do you know that they have specifically said they're going to have to kill all the cows, which was an interesting conflation. Two, of course, it was interesting to protest it by eating an already dead cow and say, we're going to kill all the cows, say the people eating the dead cows. Apparently somebody botched something somewhere.
So actually, Ocasio-Cortez was asked about it. She said, that's not in there. And they said, no, here it is. It's right here on the website. Oops, that was not supposed to go out.
Yeah.
So the Green New Deal has swiftly become a Republican shorthand for budget-busting, big government, tree-hugging, climate change-crazed liberal Democrats.
That is shorter.
What was that, the old one? The latte, Volvo-driving, Birkenstock-wearing Democrat?
Yeah.
But the whole idea
That's
here is, and the problem is, the public says, that's really not a bad idea.
Yeah,
so
some of those things.
Republicans can yell about socialism, and the Democrats are thinking, Medicare? You're trying to take away my Medicare? And the Republicans can rail about this, as they always do with the previous example, the Birkenstock-wearing, Volvo-driving, latte-drinking Democrats. Yeah. Mm. But if the public is okay with that, then that just doesn't really work. I mean, do you think that's a line Howard Schultz is going to use?
That's a lot of words.
You latte drinking. Oh, wait a minute. I made my money on latte drinking.
Right. That could be a problem for him. They could start
by the way, he's hiring Republican consultants to help him with his independent campaign, which tells you everything you need to know. But the point is, the various troubles over Omar impeachment and the Green New Deal might not seem like much from the outside. And you know what? They don't. But on Capitol Hill, the combination threatens to overshadow the legislative achievements of Democrats. And by the end of Wednesday, which was yesterday, the Speaker's office was trying to get back on message, slamming the president for refusing to turn over documents to a series of House committees and trying to stay ahead of restless supporters back home.
All right. Well, that's not legislation.
So basically, that's the state of play. And the Democrats will try to figure out what to do with that particular statement and that particular Congress member in terms of making sure that the coalition that they have, and it is, the Democrats are a coalition party. They're not an ideological party. And so they'll have to figure that out. Those are growing pains. That's not, putting positive spin on it or lipstick on a pig or anything like that. It's a fight. They're having it. Best to have it behind closed doors and figure out what to do. I'm not that worried about it. Pelosi speaker.
Yeah. Not too worried about it, actually. I guess the most damaging, to me anyway, stories about Democrats in disarray have been about pointing out that, Pelosi appears to maybe have misread what the caucus wanted to do and what the caucus should do about these comments, and got out ahead of everybody here by endorsing the idea of bringing forward a resolution. And I think that now there's a lot of second thoughts. Some of it has to do with defense of Omar, and some of it, from my perspective, my issue with it is I can't for the life of me think of a thing that we get that's good out of making a resolution out of this. And I guess it just comes from when you get mad about something and you're a legislator, the tendency is to say, I will legislate about this. And that is not always the answer. And I guess that was the tool they had in their toolbox, a resolution about anti-Semitism that, it's just, it's already been done this session. I mean, it's been appended to legislation already. So we actually already have that base covered. And I noticed that there's still anti-Semitism. And I was excited as I am to have a copy of the resolution to wave at Nazis when they threaten people. I'm not optimistic about its getting very much done. And if the only other benefit of it is to inflame an internal war that should be settled behind closed doors, I can find no benefit. Yeah, I understand the offense. I think I understand what she probably would have said had she had it to do over again. And I understand the possibility that, that may be exactly what she meant, but the resolution doesn't solve any part of it. And that's a vote and a public problem, and getting rid of it and settling it in another way is probably the wisest thing to do. As long as it's a part of the legislative schedule, everybody feels free to comment.
Yep.
Put it away, and it's an internal matter. People will still comment, but you say, but you have no role in this. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Meanwhile, another thing that is contentious, and something can be contentious without dividing Democrats, I just point this out, is the Democrats move toward impeachment.
Okay.
Right? The Democrats, says NBC News, are divided over whether and how fast to impeach the president. That hasn't stopped them from launching down that path. Well, that second line is the more important one.
Okay.
Essentially, the older, wiser heads in the party, the Jerry Nadlers and the Elijah Cummings and the Nancy Pelosi's, are saying we need to do investigations. You have to set the predicate for impeachment before you impeach.
All right.
All right. Representative Tlaib said, we know enough. Go ahead and impeach. Oh. Now, anybody can introduce an impeachment resolution. It doesn't mean it's going to be taken up by the House, or if it does, it doesn't mean it'll be voted up. It might well be voted down. Actually. But they're allowed to introduce it if they want to. It's been introduced before. It was introduced last year by other people before these freshmen got here.
Right.
And so what's the big deal? The big deal is now people are actually aware, and most of the public, 2/3, think that Trump committed crimes. So what do you do? And that's not an easy question to answer. From the political perspective, what you'd like to do, as you were just pointing out with resolutions about anti-Semitism or racism or anything else, is one would like to do something that is effective.
Yes, that'd be nice.
Cory Booker, for example, is introducing legislation that has sweeping effects on criminal justice reform. Mm-hmm. Right? That's one. If you want to be effective about doing stuff, you can do stuff like that, not necessarily resolutions. But Nadler and Justice and other people are going to be faced with the situation of trying to catalog and document exactly what it is that Trump did. And that's going to be done in parallel to whatever Robert Mueller's doing, which we don't know. Speculating that, it's all going to backfire and it's overreach and it's backlash, when in fact you don't even know what it is that you're going to wind up being able to present to the public is silly. It's part of the process. It doesn't take place right away. It's not being rushed. It's being done deliberately. It's a good thing. And regardless of whether the media says Democrats are divided on this in terms of speed, the fact of the matter is there is a process. It'll take place, and it's taking place now. We started to see that with the Oversight Committee hearings on Cohen. With
lots of interest.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of those controversial, scare quotes around controversial.
I'm very worried.
So
scared.
Freshmen asking wonderful questions on Michael Cohen about who else knows about potential crimes and who should we be asking.
Yeah.
The CFO of Trump organization. Okay, thank you. That's good. What else do we need? Well, you might need the taxes. Okay, maybe that's Ways and Means, but good. This is what we need. Give us the roadmap and we'll go follow it.
Yeah. Well, it has worked out so far, and she did a fantastic job and gained a lot of credibility, I think. At least, well, the irony of it is she gained credibility among people who were giving her less than she was due, and those who love her already were giving her plenty. But so this was good. She was reaching new audiences. And yesterday's hearings, same thing, as you pointed out. Congresswoman Underwood, likewise, made a big splash and had some excellent questioning. And you also included in your list here, but we haven't yet discussed the work of another new member. She is new, isn't she? I don't recognize her. Nanette Diaz-Barragan from California, who put together a tremendous cross-examination of Nielsen on refugee policy, or rather asylum policy in particular. And clearly, I don't know what her background is. Maybe she was an immigration lawyer, but she certainly looked like she was one, pressing the Homeland Security chair or secretary on the specifics of asylum law that really, you don't have to be an immigration lawyer to know this because it's been in the news so much, and she's clearly ignorant of it, and Barragan called her out really well.
She was the one that went into asylum, specifically saying to Secretary Nielsen, did you know why are people seeking asylum being turned away? And Nielsen said they're not. And then she said, well, I was down there, and they are.
I went. I watched. You can't say this stuff. But she had some great specific examples of what border agents were actually doing versus what they were supposed to be doing. Nielsen had no answers for it, and she pointed out, that you're the one who's supposed to have those answers. It's unacceptable
You're supposed to know before you come to this committee, even if you didn't know before.
Right. That's why we tell you ahead of time. Anyway, exactly. It was tremendous. Everyone did a terrific job with it.
So that's oversight on Nielsen and what's going on at the border that is non-Trump. And then there's more oversight. The House Oversight Committee is going to investigate Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and his potential voter suppression win, and the idea that as Secretary of State he was supervising his own election.
Yes, well, good. I'm glad. That's the sort of thing you always wish would be examined, and it's not entirely clear who gets to do that. So it's unusual for the federal government to look at a state election this closely. But then again, we're the ones. The federal government's responsible for guaranteeing a Republican form of government to the states. So that's their authority. Good. I'm glad, because I think they'll find.
Is it overreach? It's not overreach. You just explain why it's important.
Yeah. Everyone thinks it's overreach. Oh, it's a state matter. It's really not. I mean, it is, but
it's such a state matter in North Carolina 9 that there's no representative in Congress right now because the House refused to accept any of it.
Yeah. So we have a little stake in that, and it's important to us. If we're going to have a federal system, we have to have some guarantee that everybody who lives in one of the states that makes up the federation gets to elect a government fairly. Otherwise, what's the point? We're not going to federate with states that don't have free elections.
So from the New York Times story, we'll be specific. The House Oversight and Reform Committee is investigating allegations of voter suppression in Georgia under Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who has since become governor. The investigation was revealed in letters that the committee's Democratic leaders sent on Wednesday to Mr. Kemp and his successor, Brad Raffensperger. The letters instructed Mr. Kemp and Mr. Raffensperger, both Republicans, to provide by March 20th a wide range of documents concerning voter roll purges, holds placed on voter registration applications, polling site changes and closings, and other voting-related issues. Also, all documents related to the potential conflict of interest Mr. Kemp faced in administering an election in which he was a candidate. So good for him, and I'm glad they did that.
Yeah. All right. And some rare Article 4 fun for all of us.
So, again, to finish up, take you through the 10 o'clock hour here. There are some things that the Democrats are also not rushing to do. This is from Politico. Getting some comment today. Yes. It gets real personal, real fast. Democrats fear targeting Trump kids could backfire. They worry zeroing in on Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric would be politically perilous.
I had to worry about something.
In fact, they would prefer to let federal prosecutors handle the family while they take on the president themselves. But
okay.
That's okay. That's fine.
A good trade. I see it. Yeah, I mean, I'm instantly on my guard when it becomes about Democrats fear, which would say I fear hearing that Democrats fear something. But yeah, I mean, that's not a bad breakdown of responsibility. If you are in the federal government, we will look at you. If you're one of the kids smart enough to stay or too dumb to be allowed in.
Donald Jr., SDNY can do that. But Ivanka and Jared are in the government, and that is perfectly within rights.
I think that's absolutely fine. And, I still feel like Eric is trapped in all this. But I'm sure he's done something wrong. Tiffany, so far so good. Barron, aces. Keep it up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So Jerry Connolly is the one who's fueling this. This time he's on record. Getting to family members is dangerous, I think. A senior member of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, Jerry Connolly, said only because it gets real personal, real fast, and it risks backfiring. Maybe at some point we have to call him in, but I'd rather let prosecutors look at that. But Nicholas Grossman, who's an international relations professor and senior editor at Arc Digital, writes, Ivanka and Jared are powerful public officials, nepotistic conduits for corruption and ongoing counterintelligence risks. Don Jr., at minimum, tried to collude with Russia and uses his dad's position to profit the family business. Not investigating them is a dereliction of duty.
Yes. Also, I mean, Don was invited to testify by Republicans, so doors open.
But he also points out Jared and Don Jr. are some of the most unpopular public figures in America. So when you worry about the optics, don't worry about the optics.
Yeah, that's true. And as long as the justification is there. So far, nobody has a reason to bother.
It's the same as impeachment. Do the investigation, present your data, and then, for example, why would you get Alan Weisselberger in? Because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez asked Michael Cohen who else would know about the payments that were made to Stormy Daniels, and the answer is Weisselberg. Now you have a reason. So when you do it that way in committee and you do it in public and you put down the predicate, all of a sudden it's not overreach. It's just following where the data's taken you.
Okay. Yeah. I'll agree with that. I don't know if I have a choice, but
you don't.
Okay.
You don't.
I feel like I do. That's the important part.
Because I'll cry. I don't know. Whatever.
All right. Well, let's see. Anything else we want to cram in here?
Just a couple of things here.
Give it a shot.
The background for all of this politics is real life. Okay, here's some real life. Signs of economic strain emerge in Trump's home base. The president's most beloved industry is flashing economic warnings in New York City and key regions across the nation. The luxury real estate market is sagging. The GOP tax law is hitting real estate markets across the nation. Signs of stress across the broader housing market suggest the industry, which made Donald Trump rich, helped thrust him in the White House, and remains a constant obsession to him, could also be the thing that slows his economy and dents his chances at a second term, which I don't think he's getting.
How did he? So his tax bill did this? How did he?
Well, it's really the SALT taxes. It's a state and local taxes, and if you're above 10,000, I think is the number. Check me on that. I am not a lawyer, an accountant, or anybody who knows anything about this. But you wind up, not being able to deduct, and that hurts you. And so, the housing market may not cause the next recession like it did in 2008, but weakness in the construction of new homes, sales of existing homes, and affordability for millennials looking to buy for the first time could contribute to a recession arriving as soon as next year or prolong a downturn. May not be the cause, but it may prolong it or contribute to it. And one area where housing market stress is obvious is the one Trump knows best, high-end apartments in Manhattan. Foreign buyers are disappearing. You know why? Oversight is looking at them.
Oh, yes, right. Well,
wealthy residents flee to lower tax states. And when you look at the New York metro area, we're looking at an extended period of stagnation.
Well,
And
I suppose that
downright
was
so-
a calculated risk for Russian oligarchs to say, on the one hand, it will lead to greater scrutiny of our money laundering through high-end real estate in New York and Miami. On the other hand, we might be able to get the nuclear codes or disassemble NATO, so maybe we should give it a shot. I see.
The Manhattan declines are directly linked to the late 2017 tax law that capped the mortgage interest deduction and indirectly to the capping of the state and local taxes.
Keeping
People
it low.
joke that they should have called the tax bill the Everybody Moves to Austin Act. This wasn't virtuous tax policy. It was punitive tax policy, says Joseph Brusilis, chief economist at RSM US.
I see. Okay, and everyone will move to Austin to avoid state income tax.
Taxes in New York, right?
Gotcha.
Of course, the Austin housing market is booming and kind of expensive, so that's a problem
it?
in and of itself.
Okay.
But anyway, it is
Thought they were gonna move
March,
to
and I
Costa
guess
Rica.
tomorrow is Jobs Day, right? It's the first Friday in March.
I guess
Friday of
that's
the month.
right. Yeah, I usually forget that until the next first Friday. I put it out of mind. But
Right.
yeah, I guess that's true. All right.
So we'll get a quick look at the spotlight and
Yes.
of what's going on. But that pretty much is my segment for today.
All right. It's a good length of segment, and you got 13 more seconds of it before music starts if you want. But
Well, that's where I get to say this is Greg Dworkin speaking to my good friend David Waldman. Kagro in the morning. Remember, there's a reason for process, and pay attention to it at least sometime.
okay, now will
Like
be
when
the
we
time.
tell you to.
Yeah, right. And not a moment before. You have 13 seconds to consider process. Thanks very much, Greg. This
Take
carries
care.
us all
Talk
the
to
way
you
through.
on Monday.
Very good. I wonder if anything will happen between now and then. You'll let me know if it does.
I will.
Okay, great.
There's
That's
a process
deal.
for that.
That's right. I will call up a motion to bring you in on Monday. Thanks again.
Good
Have a
luck with the
weekend.
Genius Bar.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm going to need it. Okay, back in a minute. Not from the Genius Bar, but from this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. One of the great losses of losing the use of the laptop is the much quieter navigation system. I have only my, by name, Magic Mouse here from Apple for the Mac Mini is a very noisy mouse. So there's a lot of that sort of clicking noise going on. And then I thought maybe I'll mute the microphone when I know I'm going to click when Greg is talking, and I won't be clicking in the middle of his discussion. And then I realized the mute button is as noisy as anything else. I got to see if I can get one of those remote setups, a button that will mute the microphone, but that isn't on the microphone, so I can mute it a lot quieter. There's a couple of gadgets I think we could do with in cleaning up the audio here. Anyway, I used the break to check into the structure of the Committee on Homeland Security in the House, just so that I could give proper kudos to the chair of the committee, Benny Thompson, for running a show that I guess was perhaps informed by the same thinking that Chairman Cummings used in running the Oversight Committee. I'm curious whether they adopted a similar strategy. But as I mentioned, Nanette Barragan did a wonderful job with her questioning, and Lauren Underwood as well. And I'm curious whether there was a conscious strategy to work with freshman members so that they would shine, or whether, despite other people's best efforts, they were able to shine anyway because they were always going to. I don't know whether anyone was actively working against them in doing this. I doubt it. But the question in my mind is, were they destined for this performance? Were they helped to this performance? I don't know if it really matters a great deal. I think I almost prefer to hear that they were, a little bit of both. They clearly, it's one thing to hand people the opportunity, and it's another for them to be able to make the most of it. And you have to have talent, or at the minimum, passion to make that work. And it seemed like it worked that way at least for Congresswomen Underwood and Barragan. And some other good mentions in there. Slotkin got mentioned. I'm looking around just to see others who had the opportunity to stand out. I didn't hear much about the questioning, although I did hear a lot of input on the other major issue of the day, Representative Omar's comments, or rather discussion, not even that one, I'm sorry, discussion of the procedure on motions to recommit from another freshman member of this committee, and it was Xochitl Torres Small. I didn't hear any excerpts of her questioning, if she did any, of Secretary Nielsen. But anyway, I thought I would check into Nanette Barragan's background just because I happened to see more of her exchange than Lauren Underwood's. I just wanted to see if she is an attorney. I'm just curious if she was a immigration attorney. Let's see. Some very early legal work as a intern/extern for Los Angeles Legal Aid Foundation, externship at the U.S. Attorney's Office, Central District of California. She worked with attorneys in the Organized Crime and Terrorism section. That should be interesting come oversight time, although she's not on the oversight committee, but organized crime, that can only be helpful. Let's see. While there, Barragan assisted on a money laundering trial team. That could be helpful, too, in investigations and in prosecuting Central Violations Bureau cases. Well, maybe she wants to help out with the prosecution of the impeachment. Let's see. Then went on to join Latham and Watkins, where she worked on a variety of cases from land use to securities litigation. Also lead attorney in an immigration asylum case. There we are. There's the answer. While at Latham, Barragan was the lead attorney in an immigration asylum case spanning 3 years for a child and mother from Guatemala. Withholding of removal was granted. After Hurricane Katrina, Barragan and her colleague Blake Megdal flew to Biloxi, Mississippi to provide pro bono assistance to victims of the hurricane concerning insurance claims. She also served as a child advocate and was the Spanish-speaking adoption attorney for low-income families seeking adoptions. That's the legal career section from Wikipedia on Nanette Barragan. So it's very impressive. Let's see. Political career, Clinton White House Office of Public Liaison, doing African-American outreach, facilitator between the president and African-American organizations such as the NAACP. This is obviously in the late 90s, because that's when Clinton was in the White House. Let's see, 2012, took a leave of absence from her law firm to move to Florida to work on President Barack Obama's campaign with the voter protection team. She's got a good nose for the right places to be. Served as the out-of-state volunteer attorney director and recruited attorneys from across the country to volunteer in Florida to make sure every eligible voter had the opportunity to vote. Good thing. Those are the ones that tend to make it to your early Wikipedia file. Anyway, also worked ran for city council in Hermosa Beach. Let's see, fighting an oil company's proposal to drill 34 oil and water injection wells in Hermosa Beach and into the Santa Monica Bay. Barragan beat 6 candidates and was the top vote getter, the first Latina ever elected and the first woman in 10 years. How do you like that? So, okay, pretty good. That's interesting. And I guess she's, let me see, I better check up on the elections history here too. Barragan, or the House of Representatives. Barragan officially announced her candidacy for California's 44th Congressional District on Equal Pay Day. This was back in the 2016 cycle. Oh, so there you have it. Seat was being vacated by Congresswoman Janice Hahn in June 2015. Let's see, some good reviews from the newspapers. After announcing her candidacy, received major endorsements. Let's see. November 8th general election, Barragan defeated State Senator Isidore Hall III to succeed Hahn. So she's not in her first term. She's in her second. So that's interesting that she flew under the radar. Oh, it's very easy to do as a then freshman member of the minority. It's easy to see how she didn't rise to our attention. So my apologies. She is not a freshman member. She's in her second term. So, okay. Well, very interesting. Very well done regardless. I don't care if you were there 50 years. The questioning was done expertly, and I guess now we know why. All right. Just wanted to give credit there, and credit to the chairman for giving leeway to and not succumbing to the old style. And it's really antiquated at this point in time. The antiquated old style version of leadership, giving the most senior members the spotlight and refusing it to the newer members. Anyway, I hope it's a conscious strategy being practiced across all committees, but I can't promise you. But the fact that we got some backup in actual reporting from the HuffPost the other day, I think speaks well of things. All right, let's see. What else have we put away in pocket that requires attention? I guess by way of completeness, I thought I might take a look at this here. Tegan Goddard had included this in his Political Wire roundup, a excerpt from a Politico report. And I guess the question is the Politico article important enough, succinct enough, and informative enough to justify reading the whole thing? Maybe. Or do we just go with the excerpt that Tegan Goddard gave us? Tegan Goddard's headline on the excerpt was, Omar Uproar Swamps Pelosi. There's something to it, I guess. And maybe I'll take a look. I mean, I'm not saying she's in serious trouble or anything. I'm just saying I think the sense is that this thing got away from her pretty quickly, and she had an awful lot on her plate, to be sure, and had a lot of work to do. I think she probably should have remained focused on trying to get everybody on the same page on motions to recommit and other unifying subjects. And this one, by definition, was not going to be helpful in terms of unity, probably, although she may have thought that no-brainer, everyone will line up for this one because of the nature of the comments, and it turned out not to be true. Omar Uproar Swamps Pelosi is actually the headline used by Politico, the article from which Goddard was drawing here. John Bresnahan, Heather Cagle, Sarah Ferris put this one together, with the fallout over Representative Ilhan Omar's controversial comments paralyzing House Democrats. I don't know about that. Speaker Nancy Pelosi found herself on the floor Wednesday afternoon asking some of her closest allies what exactly she should do. For 20 minutes, Pelosi huddled with senior members of the Congressional Black Caucus, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, and Representatives Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas and Karen Bass and Barbara Lee of California, to try to determine what kind of resolution the CBC would back that rejected Omar's remarks about Israel without unfairly singling her out. It's a good thought. I don't know if it can be done. It's a balance that Pelosi and her deputies initially failed to reach when a draft resolution began circulating Monday night, and it's a surprising scenario for the veteran Democratic leader who has long prided herself on an intrinsic understanding of her caucus, but who now finds herself struggling to clean up the latest political mess created by a high-profile member of the freshman class. These are just the growing pains, that's what Greg called them, of our coming into our own as a majority, and Speaker Pelosi is the one who has to try to put it all together and govern day to day, said Representative Jamie Raskin of Maryland. It's not easy, but people have lost a lot of money betting against Nancy Pelosi before. I think that's a pretty good summary of it. The real problem would have come from saying, nope, I've committed to it and we're plowing ahead. Sometimes it actually pays to simply say, I'm sticking with the plan, and other times it pays to say, I'm going to need to confer with everybody and figure out what to do. I mean, the original plan was to have that thing on the floor Wednesday. Luckily, there's a big legislative package, H.R. 1, that can be used instead to occupy our time. Anyway, back to the article. Still, the episode clearly brings to an end a string of major wins for Pelosi. I don't know about that. You can start another one, I suppose. Who seemed almost politically untouchable after she dispatched a pack of rebels to regain the speakership, and then held her caucus together for weeks as she defeated Donald Trump in his border wall demands during the longest shutdown in history. Now the California Democrat is staring down a new crisis: how to police one of her own, after a series of comments that some Democrats say are anti-Semitic, and there's no easy solution. Pelosi called an emergency meeting Wednesday night with her senior lawmakers on both sides, both sides of the debate. Okay. Why would you talk to them about this? That doesn't make any sense. Both sides of the debate to try to resolve their differences, though the meeting ended without a final decision on the resolution. If Pelosi comes down too hard on Omar, she risks alienating progressive lawmakers and outside groups that have rallied to the Minnesota Democrats' side. If she pulls her punches, Pelosi will anger Jewish lawmakers and groups outraged over Omar's latest remark about pro-Israel advocates' allegiance to a foreign country. Pelosi and her leadership team have struggled to contain the furor from all corners of the caucus and have seemingly stumbled in recent days over how to respond. At first, Democrats planned to take quick action and pass a resolution on the matter on Wednesday. Amid stiff resistance from the left, they reversed course. I think a wise decision and all of that. On balance, back of the envelope calculation, the Jewish members of the caucus are probably among Nancy Pelosi's, for the most part, among Nancy Pelosi's strongest supporters. There are those who are not, and those folks will probably find themselves even more alienated, but they are lower among the ranks. I think Nancy Pelosi can more easily, well, she'll survive both, but she can more easily handle the fallout of disappointing senior members who have long-standing relationships with her than she can. Then she'll do better that way than in disappointing newer members who feel less beholden to her. Let me just put it that way, I guess. By the way, I don't know if I have in pocket somewhere, but if not, we'll come back to this idea of exactly what her remarks were, Omar's remarks about pro-Israel advocates' allegiance to a foreign country. As loaded a term as the allegiance issue is, I have my doubts about its continuing power. It is a historical power, and there's a historical weight to the loading of the term that's responsible for the loading of the term. I don't know if it's operative anymore. And Paul Waldman, I think it was, wrote a pretty good op-ed or maybe a piece in I don't know where it was. It was in the Washington Post, almost certainly. It might have been in Greg Sargent's corner there. And I think I put it together. But the basic gist of it being that when they talk about supporters of Israel these days, that's as likely, if not more likely, to be the description adopted by evangelical Christians whose commitment to Israel is that of a cannon to its fodder. It's not really support of the people who make up Israel. I support Israel as a concept because I think it has a part to play in some mythological, biblical apocalypse scene, and that's not really worth anything to people who actually support the people who live in Israel, no matter of what persuasion, because a lot of people get killed in this mythological conflagration, and if you turn out to bring it, if you attempt to bring it to reality rather than leaving it in the realms of biblical mythology, a lot of people are going to pay with their lives, and that's not really very helpful. But the trope about dual allegiances or allegiance to a foreign country had a lot more heft as an anti-Semitic remark back in the days when the conservative view of Israel was a sniffing contempt. And, in my political adult lifetime, the position of conservatives on Israel, when there was legislation or national policy making to be done with respect to Israel, it was about loan guarantees for Israel. And it was the conservative position to oppose them vigorously. It was the liberal position to support them. And while we can all talk about the eventual fallout of that some other time, conservatives aren't Israel supporters of long enough standing for me to take them seriously, nor is their current support of Israel serious support of a peaceful coexistence in Israel. So I'm not particularly interested in their point of view on this. And I won't have that drive what Democrats do about these comments. And I think it's long past due that we acknowledge that. It doesn't even require acknowledging the difference between the Israeli people, if there is one, and the Israeli government. I just want to talk about and call out the idea that Christian evangelical Americans have anything genuine to say with respect to support of Israel or anti-Semitism, for that matter. They're just not reliable sources of input, outrage or otherwise, on that subject. All right, we'll go back to the article here. Pelosi and her leadership team have struggled to contain the furor from all corners of the caucus and have seemingly stumbled in recent days over how to respond. At first, Democrats planned to take quick action, but then they reversed course, right, on Wednesday. Unclear now whether the House will hold a vote, as the party's factions continue to maneuver against each other. That's a loaded description of it as well. On the one side of the argument is a block of senior Jewish lawmakers, some of them leaders of powerful House committees, who have demanded Omar apologize for her remarks and be subject to some form of public punishment. I guess that could take any form, and you probably should get used to the idea that it doesn't make any sense for it to take the form of a resolution. But again, that's a symptom of being a senior lawmaker. That's your solution for everything. Some of those lawmakers wanted the resolution to mention Omar by name and were angered when Democratic leaders decided that would go too far. On the other side is an equally powerful group of black and progressive Democrats who have rallied to Omar's defense, arguing that she's being unfairly singled out and shouldn't be punished at all. Some of those members, including the Congressional Black Caucus, not the whole thing, don't want to see any resolution on the floor. In the middle is Pelosi. As the leader of the Democratic caucus for the past 16 years, Pelosi has long taken a dual approach to soothing tensions within the caucus, sometimes using honey, sometimes vinegar, but almost always getting her way in the end. Now, in her second go-around as Speaker, she's being tested by a caucus that is more diverse, restive, and outspoken than ever before. I know that it looks different or feels different to people, but I didn't come here just to sit quietly and fall in line, said freshman Representative Jahana Hayes, one of several members who criticized leadership's strategy during a tense closed-door meeting Wednesday morning. I don't mean that to be respectful. Interesting. Over the past 48 hours, House Democrats have moved into damage control mode after being forced to scrap plans for an otherwise uncontroversial measure, a resolution to condemn anti-Semitism. In a caucus meeting Wednesday, Democrats discussed broadening the measure to condemn all hate speech. It's one idea, not a great one. Supporters, by itself, not such a bad idea, but memorializing it in resolution requires backing off and starting over, I think. Supporters of the idea said that it would let the party reject the recent rise in anti-Muslim attacks. A poster at a West Virginia GOP event last week appeared to link Omar, one of the first Muslims to serve in Congress, to the September 11th attacks. From the start of the conversations, Pelosi has been pushing for a broader resolution that doesn't specifically name Omar. That's wise. According to an aide to the Speaker, Pelosi also made a point of speaking to Omar on Sunday night about the resolution before making any decisions. Also wise. Don't hide. The task of rewriting the resolution has now fallen to House Foreign Affairs Chairman Eliot Engel, the first Democrat to publicly rip Omar's latest remark. I wouldn't say it was finalized, but I would say we're moving closer, Engel said, leaving the emergency meeting in Pelosi's office Wednesday night. He said the text would probably be released Thursday, that's today, but declined to provide specifics. If the House doesn't vote on the measure soon, some Democrats fear, yikes, they could step on their own messaging as they bring their signature legislative proposal, a package of campaign finance and ethics reforms central to their 2018 midterm campaign, to the floor on Friday. I doubt it. The final version of the resolution is unlikely to win unanimous support from the caucus. Members of the CBC left the meeting Wednesday largely united that there should not be a resolution at all, arguing it would unfairly target Omar at a time when she also has been the subject of hate speech. Democratic sources said some Jewish lawmakers, including Representative Ted Deutsch of Florida, were upset by the leadership's decision to expand the resolution to address all kinds of hate speech, which they felt watered down the repudiation of Omar's comments. Leaving Pelosi's office Wednesday night, Deutsch would say little other than he is focused on making the resolution as strong as possible. We were just having a good discussion about the need for a powerful statement condemning anti-Semitism, he told Politico. That's really all I'm focused on. Another person involved in the talks who prefers a resolution focused mostly on anti-Semitism said, if Democrats try to sweep this up the rug, I suppose they mean under, we're all going to have problems, or we're going to have a problem. Okay, well, I will see what kind of problem you think you're going to have. I'm willing, I'll call. What's the problem? Democratic leaders have struggled to control the narrative publicly, instructing lawmakers to train their attention on their legislative priorities, such as the campaign finance bill, H.R. 1, on the floor this week. Pelosi and her deputies have also faced a backlash from their rank and file, with lawmakers complaining they felt blindsided as the resolution was crafted and released without a single caucus-wide email or conference call. That's an issue, too. Plans for a resolution had been in the works since early Friday, with some members privately demanding Democratic leaders take action. A draft of the 4-page anti-Semitism resolution began circulating Monday night, but even then, lawmakers complained it wasn't clear who had written it, which is also pretty amazing to me. Even Clyburn, the number 3 House Democrat, hadn't been made aware of the specific details of the resolution until Monday. He told fellow members of the CBC on Wednesday, according to a source in the room, that is what he told them on Wednesday, I guess. Part of the challenge, other lawmakers say, is that a new generation of Democrats has arrived in Washington that eschews a top-down style of leadership that has defined House politics for decades. With this raucous caucus, of outspoken freshmen, some came to Congress equipped with millions of social media followers and spotlights nearly as bright as Pelosi's. Freshman superstar, there's that term again, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez blasted out a string of tweets to her more than 3 million followers earlier this week that described in detail what she saw as Democratic leadership's hypocrisy in reprimanding Omar while not speaking out on other types of hate speech. Omar herself has responded largely through Twitter, declining to comment to reporters in the Capitol, but raising eyebrows as she tweeted back at a senior lawmaker, Representative Nita Lowey of New York, who had criticized her comments. The approach couldn't be more different than that of prior years, long-serving Democrats say. I was told to be a potted plant when I got here, said 6th-term Representative Kurt Schrader of Oregon. It's a different time. New members are not willing to sit back. A lot of it has to do with the technology and the ability for everybody to have a microphone now, added Tim Ryan of Ohio. You're seeing a generation come in that has a lot of familiarity with that, has grown up with that, is very comfortable with that, and so it's a natural extension of who they are, Ryan said. It's a new power dynamic. Interesting point. Probably so. So, that wraps up the Politico piece and brings us pretty much up to the next break. That'll also give me an opportunity to see if I was smart enough to put aside the Paul Waldman piece, but if not, I will fish it out, because I think probably, I think we possibly could do well to consider it even further, yet more about this issue, and then move on to some other exciting and different news to wrap up the day, and fulfilling the promise of almost every day's morning post announcing the beginning of Daily Kos Radio's broadcast day over at dailykos.com. Abandon all hope of catching up on the issue of the moment. Well, you know, we like to stay deep in the weeds here because, I don't know, it's fun, and you can find all your nutrients there. Is that it? I don't know. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Let's see how lengthy this other piece is here. And I'm working off of an iPad, so it's a little slower to jump back and forth between things. But I mentioned to you the piece from Paul Waldman. It is, in fact, parked at the plumb line, dated 2 days ago. But he ran it under the perhaps purposefully semi-inflammatory headline of "The Dishonest Smearing of Ilhan Omar." I would not have adopted that title for it, but I think he makes some strong points. It was his piece I had in mind when I made comments both on Twitter and earlier today here on the show about the changing nature of who is captured by the descriptor supporters of Israel. It's very broad language, and lots of people would willingly put themselves in that basket. And a lot of people, of course, would do anything to avoid it and put themselves in a very different basket. But that is the phrasing. It's almost, it's very interesting. There's a number of problems wrapped up in it, including the fact that that is the label that is cleaved to by the evangelical community, with whom I'd rather have nothing to do when it comes to almost anything, but certainly with respect to what to do, think, and feel about Israel. But on the other hand, I resent the idea that something as broad a label as supporter of Israel could be hijacked that way. Although I will say that this is the crux of the problem. The government of Israel has made it easy for them to hijack that, because it's not an easy thing to say that you're a supporter of Israel if you're not a particular supporter of its government, or in fact are an opponent of its government. But okay, well, there's a lot wrapped up in it. Anyway, let me have Paul, who gets paid to organize his thoughts, lay them out here. In what is surely the most shameful decision of her current term as Speaker. I don't know, but there's not a lot of entrance in that, so maybe it's actually true. Nancy Pelosi has decided that the time has come for the House to rebuke that's optimistic, Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota for things she didn't actually say, interestingly enough, and ideas she didn't actually express. We did have this portion of the discussion earlier this week with Armando. In the process, Pelosi and other Democrats are helping propagate a series of misconceptions about anti-Semitism, Israel, and the U.S. political debate. I'm going to try to bring some clarity to this issue. Already too late, but it gets better. Understanding how difficult it can be whenever we discuss anything that touches on Israel. And there's a reason for that. To be clear, I do this as someone who was raised in an intensely Zionist family with a long history of devotion and sacrifice for Israel, but who also, like many American Jews, has become increasingly dismayed not only by developments in Israel, but by how we talk about it here in the United States. I would categorize myself slightly differently, by the way, in case you were wondering. I don't consider myself to have been raised in an intensely Zionist family with a long history of devotion and sacrifice for Israel. More a sentimental attachment, and of course the fact that there's a branch of the family, distant cousins who live there, but what can I say? The existence of Israel has been, at best, an afterthought for me during my lifetime. It was there. I am too young to remember when it wasn't. So it's always in our household, it wasn't an issue. Israel, that's nice. Hope they don't all get killed, and hope they all aren't wiped out, and not happy with people who make an objective of wiping out Israel. Okay, that was kind of the extent of it. So he's coming at it from a different place. But all right. In the latest round of controversy, Omar said during a town hall regarding U.S. policy toward Israel, "I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country." That's the actual quote. This comment was roundly condemned by members of Congress and many others for being anti-Semitic. Representative Eliot Engel called her statement, and this is way over the top in my opinion, a vile anti-Semitic slur, and accused her of questioning, quote, the loyalty of fellow American citizens. That's the usual reaction to the trope. Pelosi then announced that the House would vote on a resolution which, while not mentioning Omar by name, is clearly meant as a condemnation of her. It contains multiple whereas statements about the danger of accusing Jews of dual loyalty. So, let's talk about this idea of dual loyalty and how it does and doesn't relate to Omar's comments. For many years, Jews were routinely accused of having dual loyalty to both the United States and Israel, as a way of questioning whether they were truly American and could be trusted to do things such as serve in sensitive national security positions. That charge was anti-Semitic, because it was used to allege that every Jew was suspect no matter what they thought about Israel, and that they could not be fully American because they were assumed to have too much affection for another country. And that may be part of the reason why we weren't raised as intensely Zionist. Maybe we were trying to avoid that. Maybe we just weren't. I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't about the particulars of U.S. policy or what Jews at the time were advocating. It was about who they allegedly were, their identity. Now, back to Omar. Here's the truth. The whole purpose of the Democrats' resolution is to enforce dual loyalty, not among Jews, but among members of Congress, to make sure that criticism of Israel is punished in the most visible way possible. This, of course, includes Omar. As it happens, this punishment of criticism of Israel is exactly what the freshman congresswoman was complaining about, and has on multiple occasions. The fact that no one seems to acknowledge that this is her complaint shows how spectacularly disingenuous Omar's critics are being, and here I pretty much agree. You may have noticed that almost no one uses dual loyalty, the actual words dual loyalty, as a way of questioning whether Jews are loyal to the United States anymore. Why has it almost disappeared as an anti-Semitic slur? It's a good question. Because, he posits, over the last 3 decades, support for Israel has become increasingly associated with conservative evangelicals and the Republican Party. And I don't think he means to go in this direction, but I would add, I think there's actually a little bit of it's okay if you're a Republican-ism going on here as well. But I don't think that's the direction he takes. As a matter of fact, here is the direction. Not coincidentally, this happened at the same time as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, the most prominent and influential pro-Israel lobby, went from supporting Israel generally to being the lobby in the United States for the Likud, Israel's main right-wing party. While AIPAC works hard to keep Democrats in line, its greatest allies are in the GOP, because Likud is a right-wing party. Hence, by the way, the rise of organizations like J Street, which I think would tell you they are more dedicated to support of Israel generally as opposed to alignment with one of their political parties. While AIPAC works hard to keep Democrats in line, its greatest allies really are in the GOP, where support for Israel and rejection of any meaningful rights for Palestinians have become a central component of party ideology. When the most prominent advocates for Israel are people such as Mike Huckabee and Sarah Palin, dual loyalty loses any meaning as a slur against Jews. The idea that taking issue with support of Israel means one is necessarily criticizing Jews as Jews ignores the last few decades of political developments around the United States' relationship with Israel. Quote, supporters of Israel, unquote, hasn't been a synonym for Jews since the 1980s, back when it was about loan guarantees, I would add. I have to repeat this, and so he does. In the United States today, a supporter of Israel is much more likely to be an evangelical Christian Republican than a Jew. Ilhan Omar certainly didn't say that Jews have dual loyalty. For instance, in one of the tweets that got people so worked up, Omar said, quote, I should not be expected to have allegiance/pledge support to a foreign country in order to serve my country in Congress or serve on a committee. You'll notice she didn't say or even imply anything at all about Jews. She said that she was being asked to support Israel in order to have the privilege of serving on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which was true. Many on the right have called for her to be removed from that committee. And there's a bunch of links provided. I see 4 here. Her argument, to repeat, isn't about how Jews feel about Israel. It's about what is being demanded of her. And here's the ultimate irony. We'll see how ultimate it is. Dual loyalty is precisely what AIPAC, in its current form anyway, I would add, demands and what it gets. Again, it makes this demand not of Jews, but of every member of Congress, and even of politicians at the state level whom you wouldn't think would be conducting foreign policy. And it is working. Take, for instance, the wave of state laws passed in recent years in opposition to the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, BDS, in which a state would refuse to do business with anyone who supports BDS. In some cases, those laws require that contractors sign a document promising not to support any boycott of Israel. It's illustrated by the case of a speech pathologist in Texas who sued over a requirement that she sign such a pledge to work in a public school district. That is literally a demand that she pledge her loyalty to Israel. She's not Jewish, and the officials who demanded that she do so aren't either. The Texas Republican Party is not exactly an organization dominated by Jews. When Governor Greg Abbott, also not a Jew, proclaims that, quote, anti-Israel policies are anti-Texas policies, he's expressing dual loyalty. Yet, when Omar says she shouldn't have to do the same, everyone jumps up to accuse her of anti-Semitism on the bogus grounds that, 1, she is secretly referring to Jews and not to what she's being asked to do, and 2, it's some kind of anti-Semitic smear to even raise the issue of people being asked to promise their allegiance to Israel, when the truth is that members of Congress are asked to do just that. When this episode is over, Omar and everyone else will have learned a lesson. You'd better not step out of line on Israel. You'd better not question AIPAC. You'd better not criticize members of Congress for the craven way they deal with this issue. You'd better not talk about how policy toward Israel is made and maintained, because if you do, this is what you're going to get. And I suppose it could be argued, yeah, that's probably the aim, because that way only one viewpoint remains in the driver's seat with respect to making policy on Israel. And I mean, it's kind of crazy, the idea that, if you want it to be a committee on policy on Israel, you could try and form a special select committee under that title. But if it's the Foreign Affairs Committee, and that's the place that members of the House of Representatives go to try and formulate foreign policy for the government of the United States, then I think it makes a certain amount of sense to include a variety of viewpoints. If it's the Israel Committee, you got an argument. I don't know that there should be such a committee, but you'd have an argument. All right. Let's see. Other subjects that need treatment before we close things out for the day. There are so many, but I thought that one was an important one. How about, let's see. Is this a Friday piece, you think? I'm going to do some internal deliberation here, but I'm going to do it externally so that there's no dead air. Where to go with this one? Let's leave that one as, well, you know what? Let's pick it up now. And maybe we can make Friday more of a Trump roundup. This is an interesting piece, and it was advertised to me as such by Sam Stein, who has a share of the byline here with Will Sommer in the Daily Beast. And this has nothing to do with anything. So let's take it. How little known Andrew Yang. Do you know Andrew Yang? Do you know that he's running for president? I mean, everybody's running for president. But do you know Andrew Yang? Do you know that you don't know Andrew Yang? And are you saying, of course I don't know Andrew Yang because he's not a elected official of any kind. And he might be a billionaire. I don't know. Everybody seems to be a billionaire this year. He's a wealthy individual, I'm sure. But anyway, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But this is an interesting story. How little known Andrew Yang may end up on the 2020 debate stage by gaming the system. This is really interesting because we have a pretty robust set of rules, although everyone tries their best to game the systems in various ways. Literally, with 100,000 people running for president or whatever, they have to have some rules and they have to come up with something objective. And say, these people who meet these criteria will be on the debate stage, and we'll try to keep the numbers under 20 or whatever. You know, they try to keep the size manageable. I think among Republicans they had the JV debates, and nobody wanted to be resigned to that, to the kids' table. So Andrew Yang, you would think, well, he's the sort of person, because we know very little about him, and he's not polling particularly well, you might think that'll be the kind of person who will be demanding a place on the debate stage, and we'll say, Democrats as an organization will say, no, I'm afraid you just don't qualify, and he'll say, rigging the system, or something like that. But, well, I'll tell you this. Here's something I like better than complaining about rigging the system, which, even if it was justified, I don't love hearing a great deal. Not because I need to protect the system, but because it's just such a hackneyed cry. But sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's not. How is he gaming the system? What's he going to do about this? Andrew Yang, by the way, I have heard his name, and he seems to be the guy most closely associated with open support for universal basic income. I think that's sort of the centerpiece that's his differentiating point. Centerpiece of his platform. Now, onto the article, and we'll see why it's so interesting. Some presidential candidates build their campaigns on grassroots support, others on personal wealth. Some ride a wave of discontent with the direction of the country. Others launch insurgencies within the party. That's pretty wide range of descriptions. And in the year 2019, one candidate is trying to prove that you can find success by going heavy on podcasts and memes. I know a lot of people who really enjoy that and who feel convinced that you can actually ride that to some considerable success. Lots of people would tell you that was responsible for a lot of the early success and even late success of Donald Trump during the campaign. So maybe it's something that ought to be emulated in a way, although hopefully not exactly the same way. Well, we'll continue here. Andrew Yang has been a Democratic presidential candidate for well over a year, but chances are you've never heard of him. He's not a lawmaker. He has just over 90,000 Twitter followers, so you must be thinking, well, he's clearly not masterful at manipulating social media. How is he going to ride that wave onto the debate stage? Well, hold on a second. I'm not there yet. As of December 31st, 2018, his campaign committee had $38,730.78 cash on hand. He spent a grand total of $33,000 on Facebook ads, and he hasn't run a single TV ad. And yet, the self-proclaimed, quote, entrepreneur who understands the economy, close quote, it's a different kind of entrepreneur, has somehow managed to get more than 47,000 individual donors to his campaign as of Wednesday night. It's a figure that's caught the attention of Democrats and other campaigns, but more importantly, it's one that places Yang close to a critical threshold. If that number rises to 65,000 over the next 2 months, he will qualify to participate in the first primary debate. His campaign says he's a lock to make it. That's really interesting. I didn't realize that was one of the criteria, and I don't know. Now I'm curious about how they set the number and whether they did a good job. I don't want to block him from the debate. I thought it would be harder to reach a threshold like that. And maybe he's just done an extraordinary job. Anyway, says his campaign, as it says here, says he's a lock to make it. 100%. Look at that. Hell will have to freeze over at this rate for us not to, said Zach Grauman, Yang's campaign manager, who I also don't know. We are averaging 1,500 donors a day. Not averaging, that is our baseline. And people don't even know who he is yet. That is interesting. Yang, Grauman predicted, would hit 65,000 donors within 2 weeks. Internally, he explained, we are jacked. That's not much of an explanation, but it's a comment. Getting on the debate stage would be a huge coup for Yang. I agree. An entrepreneur who was little known outside of tech circles. I mean, assuming he can do a good job on the debate stage. Yang, 44, worked at a series of startups before launching Venture for America, a nonprofit that matched aspiring entrepreneurs with fellowships at young companies. Aside from a few commendations from the Obama administration, he has had no experience with politics. Grauman, too, said that this was his first serious venture into political campaigns. The secret to Yang's success is both remarkably simple and deeply reflective of how the internet has democratized national politics. And we like that, right? He has built his campaign almost exclusively on the idea that America needs a universal basic income as more jobs are eliminated by automation and robotics. And people who are thrilled with the prospect of getting a $1,000 monthly check from the government, which Yang has dubbed the freedom dividend, very clever to give it a name like that, have responded by giving to his campaign and creating memes about Yang and spreading them online. Yang fans, I guess now eventually we'll find out that the Russian trolls thought, oh, this will surely bankrupt the United States in much the same way that they once bankrupted the Soviet Union by busting our defense budget. Let's promote Yang and everyone will get on board, and then they'll send out all these checks, and then the country will go bankrupt. I don't know. You could convince me that such a thing was underway. I think at this point, I'm much more open to it than I used to be. Anyway, I'm not saying that's the case. Yang fans on Twitter have gathered around Andrew Yang Dank Meme Stash, a Twitter account that pastes pictures of Yang into popular memes, and does have that Russian troll feel to it, doesn't it? Yang fans have a Reddit forum, another clue, with nearly 4,000 members where they share arguments for UBI and still more Yang memes, and his fans are quick to tweet at polling companies or reporters who don't include Yang on lists of the 2020 Democratic candidates. But the most critical point in launching Yang on his current trajectory, according to Grauman, was an appearance in February on Ultimate Fighting Championship commentator Joe Rogan's mega-popular podcast. At the time, Yang had roughly 8,000 donors to his campaign, but the appearance sent Google searches for his name skyrocketing, and in February, Yang raised $570,000 with an average donation of $16.78. And where average donation numbers being low is a point of pride, I suppose it's worth noting. That's even better than Bernie, said Grauman, in terms of the low number, I guess. I don't know if that's such a great thing. Andrew and I are both business people. We deal with numbers and charts. Everything is up and to the right since the Joe Rogan podcast. That was the key. That was the moment. Yang's team has tried to apply his unconventional media approach elsewhere. Days after the Rogan podcast, he sat down with Fox News host Tucker Carlson. He recently taped an appearance on The Breakfast Club, a national hip-hop news radio show. Word in support of his candidacy has spread to some of the internet's more vile yet influential communities as well. That's a problem. Over the past few weeks, Yang has been the topic of frequent positive 4chan threads, normally a stronghold for Donald Trump's most racist supporters. Ugh. Yang's UBI proposal has been especially appealing to 4chan users who embrace the shiftless NEET lifestyle, not in education, employment, or training. Interesting. And would rather play video games all day than have jobs. Oh boy. 4chan posters have admiringly started to call Yang's freedom dividend proposal NEET bucks. Well, that's not serious support, but okay. It's happening. It's interesting. I wonder what it could force to happen in the country. In chat rooms with names like Meme Engineering, 4chan users who count themselves in the Yang Gang plotted how they could convince other 4chan readers to donate $1 to Yang's campaign and shared memes promoting Yang's proposed $1,000 payment. In other rooms, they encouraged each other to flood internet polls with votes for Yang and made lists of reporters to email about Yang. Grauman said the campaign was, quote, unaware of the 4chan content and not posting on the site. It would obviously bother anybody if there were hate-fueled donations coming through our guy, he added. That's not what we stand for, but if tens of thousands of people hear this message and say it will be helpful for their lives, whether through MSNBC or Fox News, that's the campaign we want to build. Yang's online army includes Sandy Curry, a 62-year-old American expat living in Ecuador. For Curry, who moved to Ecuador in an attempt to make her Social Security check go farther, Yang's monthly $1,000 payment offers the prospect of making enough to return to the United States. Curry soon became a member of Yang's organizing group on Facebook. Now she tells reporters on Twitter not to ignore Yang and has urged her friends to donate the $1 that will boost Yang's total donor count. I've hit up all my friends just to say, you need to hear this guy on the debate stage, Curry said. Yang's appeal hasn't been grown entirely organically. He's done some smart, if relatively low-key, outreach to Democrats in key battleground states. In December, he took over the Facebook page for the group Progress Iowa to conduct a Q&A session ahead of a keynote address at the organization's holiday party. The following week, he took a swing through South Florida and hosted a pair of meet and greets. Okay. Let me get set up for our closing here. For all the progress that Yang has made in building up his donor base, it still may not be enough. The DNC has said that it will only host a maximum of 20 candidates for their first debate, and that it would determine who qualifies based on two thresholds: the 65,000 donor and threshold, and whether a candidate got more than 1% in 3 separate polls, national or early nominating state polls, leading up to the debate. If more than 20 candidates hit those thresholds, then the committee would have to juggle how to keep the numbers manageable, including prioritizing candidates who hit both thresholds and those who hit certain thresholds first. Yang seems destined to get to 65,000, but he still polls at the back of the pack when he can manage to even get listed as a candidate. An early February poll from Monmouth University gave him only 1%, putting him far behind the leading candidates. But other more discussed contenders, including Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, former House and Urban Development Secretary Julian Castro, did they say Julian? I guess, I don't know. And Representative Tulsi Gabbard also received just 1% in the poll. So, there you have it. Grauman, for his part, said he was confident not only that Yang would get included, but that the campaign would skyrocket after he got the exposure. He probably would. If we can get Andrew Yang to talk about the freedom dividend on a national stage, he said, we believe very strongly he can light the country on fire. Of course, the dank meme squad might actually want to light the country on fire. Kind of a weird thing, weird dynamic, and you guess you got to be somewhat careful about who you rally to your cause these days. But an interesting story, bringing up interesting thoughts about how we elect presidents and how we do so sometimes less than legitimately as well. More after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Here's the more. It's time to listen to the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam. Here's what he's got on tap here. Former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman grilled Michael Caputo on why he is pushing back on the House Judiciary Committee. Leaked chats reveal white nationalist group Identity Europa actually did some work for Steve King, too.